Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Kablan and I'm here to deliver the lesson on plotting points on a Cartesian plane, which is the first lesson for chapter 2, which you should all be beginning right now. So what I'm going to do here is just quickly go through the slides and just provide some additional commentary that I typically do in a classroom. Well, the only difference is that we're not in a classroom. So let's get this started over here and let's take a look at today's lesson here. So when we take a look at today's lesson, notice that what we're going to do here is do exactly that. This actually should be a review lesson for most of you over here. So what we're going to do here is just to go over and review what it means to plot points on a Cartesian plane. So let's get this started. Yeah, I had to throw that in there too. All right, so when we're dealing with a Cartesian plane, I'll be referring to it as a grid simply because, again, it's faster to say. So anytime I say grid, I am referring to the Cartesian plane. So you're probably asking, what exactly is a Cartesian plane? Well, as you can see here, the Cartesian plane on the screen on the top right-hand corner, okay, you notice that what we have here is a Cartesian plane, which I'm also going to refer to as a grid. And you notice there are actually two types of axes here, as you can see, with the X and the Y. All right, so what we're going to do here today, again, is just talk about it, and then we're going to also go over how we can plot points using the Cartesian plane over here. So the first thing, as you can see, we have two axes, and the first axis here is the x-axis. So the x-axis, again, is also known as the horizontal axis because it's the axis going from left to right. Now, as you can see from the dead center over here, as you go to the right of the axis, the numbers are positive, and as you go to the left, the numbers are negative. All right. Now, the vertical axis, or the axis going up and down, this is what's called the y-axis, which you can also, as I said before, you can refer to as the vertical axis. Now, when you're looking at the vertical axis from the dead center, okay, if you go up from this dead center, the numbers are going to be positive, okay, and as we go down, the numbers are going to be negative. All right. So from here, what you're going to see here is that the fact that the two axes, as you can see, meet in the dead center over here, and they meet at a single spot. Okay, and that's actually going to be the coordinates 0, 0, which I'm going to mention in a few seconds. And what we just need to know here is that the Cartesian plane, which I'm going to refer to as a grid, can also be known as an XY plane, simply because these are the two axes, as you can see on the grid there. All right. Now, when we have a coordinate that it's actually going to consist of two numbers. It's going to consist of what's called an x coordinate and a y coordinate. And basically what happens here is that when you have an x and y coordinate, this is known as a point, okay? And the point, okay, consists of two numbers, which are designated as x and y. And the two numbers together, okay, come up with a point, which is also known as what's called an ordered pair. Why? Because there's two of them, all right? Now, the x-axis is simply how the distance that it goes from left to right, okay, which you can see on the numbers dictated by the x-axis here. Now, the y-coordinate is the distance that a point goes up or down, okay, and again, this is going to be the y-coordinate. Now, as I said before, where the two axes meet, dead center over here, okay, that's going to be the point 0, 0. Okay, and the reason why it's 0, 0, because notice that the point does not move to the right any spots or up and down any spots. Now, once we throw some numbers in, you'll see exactly what it means to have an XY coordinate and how we can determine where a point is based on the X and Y coordinate. So before we begin here, we actually have four quadrants, as you can see in this diagram over here. And what we have here, starting from the top right-hand coordinate, sorry, is the first quadrant. Now, the quadrants there's four of them. Okay, they start from the top right and then go counterclockwise. So, for example, to the left of this would be quadrant 2. Okay, on the bottom left would be quadrant 3, and last but not least, we have quadrant 4 on the bottom right-hand corner. Now, what we're going to see later on in one of our final examples is that each quadrant, once you plot points, each point's going to have certain characteristics that only belong to that quadrant. Okay, so we'll talk about it when we get to that part of the lesson. All right, let's start off with the basics over here. So let's learn how to plot points over here. So as you can see, what we have here are 8 points here, all designated by certain letters. Now, what I'm going to do for each one, like I said before, is to show you how to plot each one of these points, okay, using the Cartesian plane or grid. So starting off with point A over here, notice what we have here is a point 5 and 2. All right, so starting off from the center, if you take a look at my cursor, what that tells me to do is that from the center, okay, or the origin, which has a point 0, 0, I'm going to go right 5, okay, and then up 2. So notice when I plot the point there, okay, again, the first number is always going to be the x, okay, and second number is always going to be the y. Okay, if you forget that, just remember the alphabet, okay, x is always going to come before y here, all right? So that's going to be the point 5 and 2 because I went right 5 and then up 2, all right? Now, if you look at part B, okay, notice what we have here is an x coordinate of 3 and a y coordinate of -7. So what that means from the center, I'm going to go right 3 and then down 7. And that's going to be right there. All right. So again, when you're looking at the coordinates, always make sure you're looking not only just at the number, but also see if there's a negative sign or not. So now for part C, you notice the x coordinate here is a -2 and the y coordinate here is a -4. So this one here is going to be a lot different from the other two that we've already plotted. So from the dead center here, this is telling me that I'm going to go left 2, okay, and then down 4. Okay, and as you can see here, that's this point over here. Now, just a little, before I proceed with the next point over here, when you're plotting points, okay, if you have the points and they've already been determined by a certain letter, okay, you can just write down the letter. You don't have to write down the coordinates, the actual coordinates on the grid at every time. A letter will be more than effective. All right, so now that you've seen the 3, let's take a look at the part D over here. So it's -1 and 2. So that means from the center, I'm going to go left 1, okay, because it's a -1, and then I'm going to go up 2 because it's a positive 2 over here. So -1, 2 is going to be right there. All right, sorry, right there. Okay, so for part E, we have 6 and 8. So that means I'm going to go right 6 and then up 8. Okay, and then from here we have 4, -9. So that means I'm going to go right 4 and then down 9, which is right there. Okay, and then we have G -5, -2, which is going to be left 5 and then down 2. And last but not least here, we have -6, 4, which is left 6, okay, and then up 4. All right. Now, as you know, what helps here when you're looking at the x and y axis, first of all, the x and y axis are always labeled. Okay, you can see the x right here on the right and the y here on the top. Okay, and again, the numbers here are there just to help you with labeling. Okay. So now you notice that for these ones over here, now that we've plotted a total of 8 points, what we want to do here is to talk about the properties of each point based on where they're located in the quadrant that they're in. So notice that again, we're going to use these exact same 8 points that we plotted to answer the next following questions. So for part A, this is what do you notice about the x and y coordinates of the points in the first quadrant? So remember the quadrants always start at the top right-hand corner. So the first quadrant would be these 2 points right here, specifically the points 5, 2 and 6, 8. Now what this question is asking over here is that it's just asking us when you're looking at both the x and the y coordinate, okay, what do they have in common? Now you notice if you take a look at the x's separately first, you notice that what we have here is a +5 and a +6. So what we know here is the x coordinates are positive, all right, for both of them. If you take a look at the y's, okay, you notice that both the y's are also positive. So what this means here is that every single point here, okay, on the in the first quadrant will always have an x and a y coordinate which is positive. Okay. All right. So as we go here, we're now going to go counterclockwise to quadrant number 2. Now you notice that for these one, that's referring to D -1, 2 and H -6, 4. Now if you take a look at the x coordinates, okay, notice that both of them here are negative. So we for coordinates in the quadrant number 2, notice both of them are negative. Okay, and notice that the y coordinates are positive. So that means any point here or any point or ordered pair here in the second quadrant will always have a negative x and always have a positive y. Okay, and now for quadrant number 3, if you take a look at this one, okay, notice that we have -5, -2, and -2 and -4. Now for this one over here, what I want you to see is the fact that when we're looking at all points in the third quadrant, both the x and the y will be negative. Okay, so that's for all points in the third quadrant. All right, and last but not least, in the fourth quadrant, okay, if you take a look at the x's over here, the 3 and the 4, okay, you notice that they're both positive. Okay, and the -7 and -9, which represent the y coordinates, they're both negative. Okay, so for these ones over here, I want you to see when you're looking at these points that these here are indeed going to be in the fourth quadrant here. So all points in the fourth quadrant will have x's that are positive, and then negative ones will be when the negative ones will be the y. Okay. Now, just to talk about something you're going to see in the corresponding pages in the seat work there, you're going to see that there's going to be some cases where the points would be on the x or the y axis. Okay, so I'm just going to use this as a random point over here. Let's just say I plotted the point, I don't know, 7, 0. So that means I'm going to go right 7, okay, and then 0, because I'm not going to go any spaces here. So that I'm just going to scribble this point over here. Now, notice that when a point happens to be on an axis, specifically this axis over here, the x-axis, okay, this would be, as I said before, this would be the point 7, 0. I apologize for the scribbling over here. Now, what you can see here is that when a point is on an axis, okay, it does not belong on a quadrant. So, for example, for the point 70 would simply just belong, okay, on the x-axis. Okay, on a similar fashion, if I took, for example, the point 0 and let's say 8 over here, okay, so that's going to be the point 0.8. Again, I apologize for the scribble over here. Okay, this point would not belong in any quadrant. It would just belong on the y-axis there. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that. And once you get to the seat work, that there are some cases where the points happen to be on the axis and not on a quadrant. All right. So now that you've seen how the quadrants and how to plot points here, I'm just going to go through one quick example over here in terms of how we can use a formula for the area of a triangle to determine the area of a shape. Okay, so it says here, calculate the area of a triangle with vertices a, -3, -4, 5, -4, and 5, 8. Now, just talk about this word vertices. Okay, that's just a fancy word for corner of a triangle. Okay, so don't worry about that. So if you take a look at the coordinate, the Cartesian plane over here, our very first step is to actually plot these points. So starting off with the point A over here, okay, notice what we have here is -3, -4. So both the x and the y coordinates are negative. So to plot the point -3, -4, okay, I always start from the center. So starting from the center here, I'm going to go left 3, okay, and then down 4. Okay, so that's going to be right there. All right. Now 5, -4, again, starting from the center, that tells me to go right 5, okay, and then down 4. All right, so notice that we already have plotted the first 2 points here of this triangle that we're about to finish. And last but definitely not least over here, we have 5, 8. So from here, I'm going to go right 5 and then up 8, okay? And finally, we're going to connect these 3 points here with straight lines like this. La, la, la. Okay, so there's our triangle. So that's step number 1. Now, step number 2, what we're going to do here is we're going to find the lengths of both the base, okay, and the height. And the reason for that is because the formula for the height of the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2, which we'll see in just a moment here. Now, what the length is when you're looking at the coordinates, we're just going to count the number of boxes or spaces between the points that make up the base or the bottom of the triangle. So starting from this red dot over here, I'm going to count how many boxes there are between this dot and this dot. So what we have here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 boxes. So I'm just going to label that as 8. Okay, and last but not least here, the height over here. Okay, that's going to be this distance across. Okay, we're going to count the number of boxes from here or the number of spaces. So when you're counting the number of spaces, you always start from the dot, and then you just count from there. So from this dot here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so the height here is going to be 12. Okay. All right, so we have our base and we have our height. So last but not least over here, we're now going to calculate the area of this triangle using the numbers that we have here. So the base here is 8, height here is 12. So we're just going to multiply those two numbers together. Okay, so 8 times 12 Okay, and I just did one step there. Okay, so 8 times 12, for example, okay, will give me 8 times 2 will give me 96 there, and then 96 divided by 2, that's going to give me a total of 48. Okay, and then since we don't have centimeters or meters or anything like that, okay, notice what we have here, just 48 square units. All right. Okay, and as you can see, when you turn the page in your booklet there, you'll notice there's a set of questions that you are to do. Okay, and when in doubt, okay, you can also just check out the review, which is also located on kablanmathonline.com. Okay, and that's about it. And I will see you, okay, I will see you in the next lesson.